morning. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television. Thank you for staying with us, and we welcome your contributions. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. We'll sample. That's an assurity. Your feedback towards the tail end of this broadcast, and it is in relation to the stability of the country and what's happening at the moment. The growing calls for dialogue between the president and the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. The National Cohesion and Integration Commission adds to that list of stakeholders who are concerned about the situation in the country, saying if the current situation isn't arrested, then Nairobi is likely going to take the path of anarchy. Yesterday, the AU Commission Chairperson Musa Faki Mahamat called upon the authorities in the country to reconsider their position, calling upon President William Ruto and the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga to address the situation through talks and dialogue. The continent, he said, is concerned about the stability of the country. Danvas Makori is a commissioner with the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, NCIC. Wanjiku Thiga is youth and women rights advocate, and Duncan Okach is a constitutional lawyer. Good morning to you, lady and gentlemen.
Good morning, Ayub.
Your time is all appreciated. Let's begin with the front pages of the publications and what appears to be a lookalike, though different in terms of the wordings. The Daily Nation says, wanted, the sponsors of the Kenyatta farm attack, which is an extension of the attack that was meted on the farm belonging to former President Uhuru Kenyatta. That story captured on the front page, and President Ruto yesterday condemned impunity while in Germany as the AU called for talks. The Standard says, portrait of anarchy. President Ruto condemns impunity, says police operationally independent. Azimio leaders blame the president for Monday's chaos, saying that the authorities caused violence during the peaceful march. IG Kome, concerned about violence, assures the country is safe. DPP Haji orders IG to investigate planners and financiers of the mayhem. The Kenya Kwanza leaders otherwise claim Azimio sponsored Kenyatta farm attack to win sympathy. Stories highlighted on pages number 4, 5, 6, and 7 and 14 of the publication. I come to you first, Duncan. How did we get here?
Thank you so much, Ayub, for having me first. Ideally, we got here out of the sense of lack of responsibility. We have a tendency of impunity, which has cascaded. Actually, it has cascaded, and I'm quite afraid that even in terms of the school children, that is something they now take as a norm, because no one takes responsibility, especially when persons believe that they are either in power or they are too big in terms of their political place, to an extent that life, property ownership matters not. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Wanjiku, I come to you. Your account of the state of stability, I mean, despite the growing calls for dialogue between the leadership of the country, there seems to be no heeding ear to whatever the stakeholders are saying. Yesterday, the latest call came from the continent and the commission that's chaired by Musa Faki Mahamat. I mean, to what extent, what would the political establishment hear for them to think about stability and bear the vision of holding this country together?
Ayub, thank you for having me. I think it's really sad that the people we have today in leadership don't remember that they signify national unity. And it's like they're driven by vengeance. If you are driven by vengeance, you're going to, it's about self-interest. But we have to remind them that they signify national unity. It is their responsibility to respond with a unifying message. So that's why we're here today, and that's why we as advocates remind them that it is your solid responsibility first to ensure that the country remains together. And no matter who says that they don't recognize you as our leader, as our president, I mean, even if you tell your mother that I don't recognize you as my mom, it doesn't stop her from being your mother. So it is for them to put their interest, their egos beside, and push for national unity. Yeah.
And Danvas, I come to you because there seems to be a lukewarm approach and a feeling amongst members of the public when the NCIC is mentioned. We'll come to how you are monitoring the current utterances by politicians and what seems to be impunity taking course in the country. But I just want to quote what your chairperson yesterday said in a presser. That is Dr. Samuel Kobia, who yesterday said, and I quote him, Dialogue is the option which is available. We cannot solve these issues by shouting at each other and invading property. According to the chairperson, he further said, such acts do not only disturb the peace but also create worry that tensions may escalate into religious conflict and ethnic profiling. To what extent and how weighty are these words from the commission that you represent to arrest the current situation in the country?
Thanks for having me. You know, if you've studied conflicts, majority of conflicts in the world always start like this. And people assume and sometimes just don't take things seriously as they are. And we as a country sometimes forget our history in the reason 2007, but even beyond that. Things start very slowly like that. And for us actually to issue that statement is because we also do a lot of things behind the scenes to make sure the leaders actually come to a place of sense and reason, because it's very important. Now, things that they are in the country, I don't think people understand how serious they are. And okay, well, because Monday showed us how things can get really bad. But I think what is sad is at one time, people come to the table and have a dialogue. And at that time, lives will have been lost, property destroyed, and it could have been avoided way back, because it's something we've called for a while. But in reality, if you've driven in a road, let's say you're driving 100 kilometers an hour, and there's a bend coming, and the road sign warns you, says, you know, reduce to 40 kilometers or 30 kilometers, and then you think you know better, and keep on driving 100 kilometers an hour,
okay.
And then you have an accident, and you really cannot blame anybody, because you are warned clearly what's going to happen if you drive 100 kilometers an hour on a bend.
And that is a figurative way of putting it.
Yeah.
That according to the NCIC, when you talk about speed limit and the driver on the wheels, that Kenyan politicians do not observe the rules and the regulations.
No, they don't, and that's why we are here, because you won, and there you say, no, you need to slow down or observe this and do that, and when it doesn't happen, because our mandate number one actually by law and the act is actually to advise the government. Implicit in that, when if I'm advising you, because it is either maybe you don't know what you're supposed to do, therefore I'm telling you what to do, or you're probably the wrong side. Otherwise, I have no business telling you, because I already know. And that's why, as an expert commission, especially when it comes to conflict and peace and cohesion, we don't take these things very lightly. And even just beyond that statement you've read,
okay.
There's a lot of things we've tried and said behind the scenes to leaders, hoping that they'll actually heed. And as my colleague has said here, that you have to put that in the country first. Now, do you have grievances? Absolutely. And people have demands? Absolutely. Okay. But there's better ways of addressing and airing our demands. And at one point, you actually look at things and say, okay, yeah, because you can win the battle but lose the war. So what's the point of having your way but you don't have a country to govern or to have in the first place? So I really, truly hope that from what we've said and done, and not just us, the stakeholders, the international community, and the pressure that is coming, our leaders really can heed and just have a sort of dialogue, because that is absolutely necessary. Okay,
we will come to the mandate of the NCIC, formed in the aftermath of the post-election violence that engulfed the country and the ugly skirmishes that followed the post-poll chaos in 2007-08. Duncan, when you talk about impunity, I wonder where the place of the sacrosanct principle of good governance and constitutionalism lies for the ruling elite in Kenya, because the problem seems to be now revolving around how their conduct is, not the Kenyan people, because they have given out the mandate to the government of the day. The opposition says that it isn't legitimate. AU says there's need for talks, but the government is recognized by the continent. Religious leaders, NCIC all say that. But I wonder whether the avenues available for the oppositions are enough to address some of these problems that have continuously dotted the country after every electoral cycle.
Yes, I think the problem that is bedeviling us is a problem that we've had over time. And I tend to go back to the words of the late President Moi, when he said, siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya. If you look at it, we are a collection of differences, because people came from different areas, different, regions for them to come to Kenya, and for the colonizers to say, you are now in one country. If you look at even now the proposed addition of counties, you can see there's a realization that there are counties which cannot exist the way they are, and that's why they are trying to segment so that people can live harmoniously. However, in terms of the African demarcations, the colonizers did not use any formula to determine that. So we find ourselves in one country, and we have to remain as one country with all our differences, hate and love. With that, unfortunately, we have a position where there's a problem where we have infused tribalism deeply into our politics, and we are unable to remove that. And that is where I always say that NIC was put into place, and I still say that, and I've maintained that since the days of Ole Kaparo. NIC is a big letdown in terms of their mandate to this country, because they cannot be complaining when with all of us, yet we have given them that mandate, resources and power under the act that they have. More importantly, the church cannot come out, and you see now the church and religion is actually under attack even in these particular fights. But they've also been condoning this because they are entities that are supposed to speak out, and speak out loudly, clearly. If there are issues which have been raised in terms of appointments which are skewed, let NIC tell us, and they shouldn't wait for that. Immediately we have appointments of CSS or a certain group, let them give their voice that we think this meets the threshold, we think this meets, the way the Gender Commission always comes out very fast. But having said so, there are two aspects that you still look at it from both sides of the political divide, and both are to blame. Of course, I've always said, in terms of the opposition, they have a duty to accept that we have a constitution, we have constitutional ways of resolving our problems, and the moment the Supreme Court has declared and determined, then you live to fight another day. You may not agree with it, but that is the actual position constitutionally. But when you decide now, and they are doing the right thing in terms of raising issues, if there's a the cost of living is high, if there are issues pertinent to that, they are right in raising those issues, but they should not then infuse them with things which are unconstitutional, in terms of now saying you want the server to be opened, you do not recognize a president, then you lose sight of actually what you should be fighting for. But in terms of the government, it is a very sad day, because the reality of what happened on Monday is that the government itself decided to leave the police on this one side and initiate. And
we'll come to the response, because the IG had said that the country is safe, and that in caveats is concerned about the violence which happened in Nairobi and other parts of the country following Monday's protests. But Danvas, I'll come to you, Wanjiku, because the LSK also issued a statement, that is the lawyers' lobby, and where they, as other stakeholders did, expressed concern also as to where we are in terms of the country's stability. But Danvas, Wakili Duncan has said that if there is a moment that trusts stoop so low when it comes to the NCIC is in terms of taming hate speech in the country. I wonder how you will have sufficient public relation in terms of your...
First of all, I think I'm perplexed by the Wakili here. As a lawyer, you ought to have your facts straight before you assert anything. So his facts are completely not true. That's, of course, entitled to your opinion, but our opinion ought to be based on fact as a lawyer. So I think I'm questioning that. You see, first of all, to assert that we are fully resourced, as you say, we have given them resources, that's not true. Get your facts straight, that's not true. Secondly, I think he's forgetting the fact that we had a peaceful election, which we spearheaded, which we led the country through that peaceful election. 2 years of intense campaign without much incident, and a transition that the world saw. I mean, we saw what happened, and we're in the forefront, and it was by far, and Kenyans said at that time it was by far the most peaceful election in the history of our country. So that's our mandate, and we successfully transitioned the country, midwife the country through that transition. So I'm not sure what he's talking about. And when it comes to that, what you say right now, actually what you're saying, he didn't start about hate speech. But let me ask you something, Abdikadir. When you have 16,000 political aspirants, okay, across the country, last time that's what we had, and every single day you have thousands of rallies across the country, okay, and out of a campaign period of 2 years, let's be factual, because this is you actually a reporter, and you can go through your records.
Okay.
How many insightful speeches do you hear politicians speak? Very few, maybe 1 or 2 out of 16,000 out of thousands of rallies. Why? Because we're able to engage them, talk to them, and the few that did, we took action. We arrested, we took to court, and beyond that, once you take somebody to court, it's beyond that. So that is an assertion that is actually not true, and that's why we actually transitioned peacefully. Now we are here on a different matter, and that's actually we're here. And on the record, also, we're not complaining like everybody else. Now we've taken action, and we're taking action. Okay.
We are here, and duty now calls upon you because you are formed purposely, and the major reason as to why you were formed was to stave off and forestall ethnic profiling and statements that may lead to anarchy and political instability. But before I come to Wanjiku, let's now get this breaking news of the passing on of Banisa MP Kulo Hassan Malim, the MP for Banisa constituency in the county of Mandera. Kulo Hassan Malim, who passed on early this morning at a facility where he was undergoing treatment after sustaining injuries on Sunday, that is in the capital, Nairobi. The Member of Parliament, according to his family, passed on early this morning where he was undergoing treatment for head injuries that he sustained on Sunday after he was hit by a motorcycle in South B Estate here in the county of Nairobi. And the lawmaker, according to the family members, will be laid to rest at 4 p.m. this evening at the Muslim cemetery in Langata, according to the family members who had given us that information this morning. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television. Thank you for staying with us. When we come back from the break, we continue with the discussion with Wanjiku, Wakili Duncan Okach, and Danvas Makori as to the stability of the country and the concerns that are growing from stakeholders who are calling on the country's top political leadership to dialogue. Stay tuned.